Hello everyone, Coach Lockey here. So the other day I posted on my Instagram and Twitter just a video of my swing in the studio when I was hitting some balls and stuff the other day, and it said, can anyone help me with my swing? Just to see who would comment and what they would say. So you guys down that lens or any sort of pros watching, if they follow me and things like that. And this guy, Pete Lockett, commented below. He'd love to review my swing, and I thought, cool. Why don't we go through my swing together and see how possibly I could improve and get a bit more consistent. As we know, I can be a little wild every now and then, especially when I don't play a lot. So me and Pete had a chat on the phone about my swing, about the thoughts on my game and what I want to achieve from it. So shot shapes, things like that. And from that chat, he's come back with me, or to me, with a video on what he thinks I can improve on. So Pete is a full-time coach. He's on Instagram and on social media, so make sure you go and follow him. Loads of great information, and I love some of the wordings and things that he uses throughout this video. He uses this terms like the journey that we're gonna go on, and I do a thing called the journey with my students. So I have a select amount of students every year. I call it the journey because they're with me for 6 months throughout the summer. I'm thinking about doing a winter one, and if you are interested in that sort of thing, maybe comment down below as well. But yeah, he calls it a journey because it's not just a quick fix. Golf lessons, if you are going for golf lessons and thinking that your golf is going to change in an hour or half an hour, it's probably not the case. So go and give him a follow. I'll link all of his stuff in the description down below. And if you are keen on having a lesson with him also, you can also inquire through all of his links in the description. So let's see, shall we? What have I got to work on?
Right, Mr. Lockey, Coach, how are you, mate? So let's just dive straight on into a pretty simple conversation about your game. Now, obviously, watched you play an amazing amount of golf over the last few years. Some bomb balls and some absolute sort of cannons offline. So this is a really interesting one. And I think you do some fantastic things. I think you swing the golf club actually, in my opinion, pretty great. I just think the sequence and organization of a few things is probably, for me, misfiring and causing some, let's say, almost reliance, a little bit too much reliance on your hands and arms through impact. So the first thing I always do is obviously look at data, and you've obviously sent through the data, which is great. So fundamentally, just seeing that before we get started is, gives me a pretty good idea of the player. Now, typically what I like to do is just to, before we try and change anything in a crazy amount, what I want to try and do here is just have a little look at what happens from an impact perspective, i.e., the most important part of the golf swing is impact, as you well know. And it's just really just going over the ideas of what a player does in this area, right? How do they move, how they deliver the golf club, and how can they organize their body in a way that helps strike. Now, if you look at the way in which you move through impact, I think you actually strike the golf ball pretty great. But I do feel like for the large majority that all the energy is coming from the hands and arms, and pretty much how well they, let's call it release, because it is a bit of a, let's say, a bit of an overused word, but definitely the way in which you're moving through strike there is totally reliant on A, how quickly the hands and arms unload through the shot, i.e. how you unhinge, and obviously that comes with a bigger context of what type of hinge you're using, all those conversations. But let's just talk about it in raw basic ideas as session one, right? Raw basic ideas. If we had to define how you move through strike, I think we could pretty much say for the large majority, the club head is accelerating through impact through a cause and effect of maybe sort of the trail elbow, trail wrist, and how you're sort of unloading through the shot. This is very much an isolated movement of, to be honest, just educated hands, years of just educated hands hitting the shot with the hands and arms in isolation. To be honest, the body hasn't really been overly activated through the hits. Now, obviously, for the large majority of players, the more that you can use your body, especially at your speed, especially, you carry so much speed, we really want to try and make your golf swing as reliable as possible, especially at the bottom. And you have enough speed that we can use the body to help. Obviously, lower swing speeds need a little more hands and arms, but for you, we could definitely use an idea of using your hands and arms sort of less through impact. Now, the reason I think for me you use your hands and arms quite a bit through impact is the sequence of events that lead up to it. Now, we sort of talked on the phone in brief about grip style and bits and pieces. I actually fundamentally at the moment am not worried about the grip at all. I actually feel like for the large majority, it could be a useful product to us that you have quite a strong grip. I don't really have any issues. And to be honest, I'm not going to waste your time or my time thinking about too much of about the backswing. So I actually think you do a lot of fantastic things in the backswing. What I'd like to have a conversation about though is, in theory, what we're doing from this point and sort of, let's say, just prior to the top of the backswing position. And we can use as a conversation the pressure plate that you got on the floor to do a bit of work if necessary. So all I'm going to do to start with is I'm just going to pop a pretty simple bracket around your body. And we're going to use it as a, not almost a sort of a foundation, but just an understanding of how you move, right? I'm just going to drop in a pretty simple bracket there on the right hand side. Now, as you go up to the top of the backswing and come on down, I definitely feel like you move a little bit of body and mass to your lead side. But I feel like for me, a couple of things happen. If we go up to the top and come on down, I feel like you are super quick in a rotationary force, i.e. pelvis looks like to me like you just rip around the corner in a really strong rotation. When you do that, you also feel, it also looks like to me like the right elbow works dramatically in front of the body and it gets almost super narrow. So what we see here is a player that is rotating like mad and the right elbow gets almost working internal and external into your sort of side of your chest. I am going to get in front of the camera in a minute just to sort of describe to you what was going on. Essentially for me, what we see here is a player that is super rotary, i.e. the pelvis is rotating that quickly this way. You haven't had sort of the time to reorganize the arm structure. It's a very sort of Brooks Koepka sort of pattern whereby really driving that right elbow, keeping a lot of sort of, let's say, fold and hinge in the right arm, but a lot of fold and hinge in the wrists. And you've sort of almost got to impact in this scenario where you're so rotated that there's nothing left to use. It's almost like you've completely rotated your body and the only thing you have left to use are your hands and arms through the impact. So from this point onwards, the only thing left for you to use is to use your hands and arms to almost square it up. I think for you to almost stabilize that hit, I think the more that you hit down into the golf ball, the more in theory you're going to stabilize the wrist conditions, which pretty much gives you the ability to control strike, which is why I think you always then revert to this sort of down and left feel. Now obviously driver, we're talking about very similar stuff. Obviously a player that does get a little bit, let's say, underplay, maybe a little more up and across at the top of the backswing, but I think these are all power pockets. I don't see any real reason why we need to change anything crazy. But I do think in the downswing, you're just far too on top of it. So obviously in 2D dimensions, we understand playing as a pretty simple idea. Okay, and that could be a pretty simple circle around your body. And obviously everyone's going to swing the golf club slightly differently. But from a driver perspective, as you well know, right, a camera is deceptive. And ideally with a driver, to be able to hit up on a golf ball, we want the club to sort of swing under plane. So our circle can be slightly more in that type of remit rather than a 2D dimension of just a flat plane. We want to try and hit up and out, especially when we consider the conversation we had was more draw biased. So I definitely want to see a golf club that works maybe slightly under plane and slightly more, let's say, working an idea that is like that into delivery. So as we go up to the top of the backswing, I'm looking to see a club head in this scenario to work, if anything, slightly behind and underneath that plane on the way down. Now again, what I see here is a super sort of planed golf club, but again, for me, just two on top of it. Paths generating two down and left. Relative to the data you sent me, this sort of all correlates. Going back to the driver sequence, I think there is definitely some stuff at setup that we need to have a chat about in the long run, but certainly in transition, I think this is, in your own words, you can hit a ball miles off the planet, a Lockey ball, and you can also obviously bomb it. Now I think you bomb it when you time up your hands and arms basically through strike. But again, this is a pretty great example of what we're talking about. This is a player that really fires their lower body and upper body in a way that is super sort of rotary. So straight away, a lot of rotational work goes on in the body. As a result, you don't really have time to sort of, let's say, pressurize that lead side. And as you rotate, you keep pinched up, let's say really pinned up that sort of trail arm. So that trail arm works very sort of external and into your body, sort of a la Brooks Koepka, like I say. And from that position, you're going to have to really rotate your hands like mad now through impact to be able to square that golf club. And you can actually see how you load it. It's almost like you've fully exercised your ability to rotate the body. There is nothing left. The only thing you have got left are your hands and arms through impact. Essentially, you are rotating that quickly, clearing your body that quickly, that the only thing that you have at your disposal is your hands and arms. What I would like to do is try and almost reverse engineer this idea. Okay, so you're gonna have to forgive me. This is something, a bit of a ritual I try and do when I get a new student, is I try and copy your golf swing and try and get into your own boots of what you're doing. Now, I did a pretty poor job of this. I can't really do the Lockey magic, so you have to forgive me. But what I have tried to do here is create an environment where I get my lower body and upper body to fire in rotation really quickly while trying to drive the right arm really into my body as a feel. That's how I've interpreted it. Now, my backswing, I'm unable to get to your length, but I'm certainly trying my damnedest to try and almost repeat what you're doing. And I think certainly halfway down, I'm starting to starting to get there relative to your pattern, right? I'm starting to see what you do. And for me, I feel like I've rotated like mad. I feel like my lower body has started to rotate like mad. And I feel like my chest has almost got pre-open relative to target. And from here, I just feel so rotated that I have nothing left. So the only thing that I can do is just get my hands and arms to flip through strike, because I don't feel like I've got anything else left to be able to use. So from face on, again, what I've tried to do here is I've tried to sort of almost mimic to an extreme what's going on between A and B. So as you go up to the top of the backswing, you can actually see me there. I'm actually trying to go up to the top, get my right arm to really fold into me, almost maintain and almost increase, that's the ideas, and I hate this word, really hate this word, but lag. I feel like, again, really narrow, right arm working into me, my lower body rotating like mad. And essentially, for me to do this, I feel like I have to put pressure down and forward, but then I have to feel like I'm almost staying behind it. It feels a bit nuts to me, so my apologies, but I definitely feel like they don't feel too far away. Maybe I've added a little more, too much tilt, and I think that's probably why you're able to hit more down than I am, because you're able to control your spine angle. I definitely feel to do this, I have to almost hang back. I'm not saying that that's something you do, but I do feel like that's part and parcel of these pieces. I think we're pretty close to impact, but I do feel like I'm having to use quite a lot of my hands and arms through impact there, because my body's almost, let's say, pre-done. Hopefully that makes relative sense. What I've actually then gone on to do is almost demonstrate, and which I'm going to get in front of the camera in a moment, of where I actually want us to move towards. Hopefully this makes sense, and if you've got any questions, let me know. So essentially what I've done here is I've almost tried to create a bit of a Tommy Fleetwood type golf swing, where essentially I maybe move my pelvis and sort of pivot a little more towards my lead side, loading that pressure mat a little more to my lead side. Now you can see there at the backswing, if I just draw a pretty straight line up, right, if I just maybe just draw a line up my trail toe, my lead toe. I've tried to overdo this from a presentation point of view, but we get a pretty good sort of sense here where your body and mass is loading, right? We can see that for the large majority, I would say you're more off the golf ball, and I would say that like my pelvis is more into the golf ball, more to the lead side. Very sort of a la Rory McIlroy, which I'm sure that makes pretty good sense. As I work down to the downswing, I am naturally trying to, I'm trying to really sort of feel like I'm moving towards the target while trying to keep everything really closed. So relative to the target, if I just stop halfway down versus your move, again, obviously I'm trying to make this as exaggerated as possible, but we get a pretty clear content here of how much, let's say, my body is towards target. I definitely feel like in addition to that, my wrists are working different, the club face are working different, which we'll come to. But as I go through the shot, my impact position is going to feel a lot more stable, and I can go through the shot to a little more of a draw bias pattern. My right foot almost working back and away from me. So as I got an impact position now, can you see that sort of everything is working together? Not great, I'm not great at this, but everything is sort of working together rather than being flippy. Now as a final piece, I'm sort of hopeful this sort of makes sense again. You're going to see some pretty different ideas in the downswing. I'm just going to take myself up to the top of the backswing and stop. This is a rehearsal, but I want you to sort of see what I'm trying to rehearse. I'm trying to go up to the top of the backswing. You won't see it from this angle, but you can see how my footwork is working. My right foot sliding, I'm almost sliding towards the target. So I'm going to go up to the top of the backswing and stop. I'm trying to move pressure laterally towards the target without really opening up. And if I just stop myself at halfway down, what you're going to see there, if I maybe stop us at maybe sort of very similar ideas, some real simple stuff that we can use to sort of negotiate pretty simple guidelines. Knees relatively level to where they started. Ideally, the shaft sort of correlating somewhere close to the trail forearm. those two are pretty simple correlations that we'll use as a checkpoint moving forward in our journey together. Rather than everything working low left, we're looking to see an environment where we keep the club head much more out in front of us. So if we just watch mine go through the shot, I'm not great at this, but hopefully at the same point there, you can see the club head is a lot more neutral, releasing that right foot in a different way and going through the shot in a very different manner, trying to raise that exit. So again, quite a lot to go at, which I'm going to get in front of the camera now and make it super simple, but we're trying to sort of make the shaft plane, what we see on the way down, slightly lower than the exit. So there's your downswing delivery, and your above swing is slightly above, which is going to give you that draw bias pattern. If we have a little look at your exit line, just draw a line relative to the shaft plane and have a think about where you're coming from. Can you see how your downswing is a lot more sort of, let's say, on top of the golf ball, and your exit is on a low plane? So relative to a player that's looking to hit a bit of a draw, I think for me, we've got to shift the plane. And to shift the plane, you've got to shift your body in a different way. To shift the body in a different way, we've got to reorganize the sequence.
So let's let the journey begin.
So you're going up to top of the backswing, and once you're up to top of the backswing, you are firing that pelvis rapidly quick. Now, when you do that, the right arm also works really in front of the body. Almost like if you grab a golf ball and I was going to throw it at the wall, it's almost like the same actions. The lower body in a way is almost rotating so much, the lower body is almost maximized, that right arm so, let's say, into the target, let's say elbow point towards the target, but the only thing you have left at the bottom is this move. So you're basically, for all the world of doing amazing rotations, you're just hitting it with the hands and arms, which is firstly a bit of a testament to you as a player, because that means that in theory you're doing everything with coordination, and if you've played a few holes and a few rounds of golf, you're going to play pretty good golf. But if you haven't played for a while, which, like you say, when you do a lot of Edstin, you've now got to go and play golf just using your hands and arms through impact, even though you have a massive amount of speed. I think what we need to do is use the speed in the appropriate place and get away from the idea of just trying to time up strike with this move. So if we kept it like really simple, I think you do everything really, really well. I just think you do it in the wrong order. I think you go up to the top of the backswing. I think everything gets used really, really quickly. So there's a big firing of the lower body, and then it's just hands and arms through the strike. And depends on how well you can use those hands and arms through impact, pretty much defines you as a golfer. So I think we change that order. And if I use an alignment stick to give you this impression, rather than us setting ourselves up to the golf ball, and you can see there I'm going to use an alignment stick to pretty much represent my spine angle or the way in which my body and mass moves. If I set myself up to that cane and I try my best to almost stay on this cane and rotate, so ideally I'm going to go up to the top of the backswing now, and I'm not really allowing myself to move to my lead side. I'm just going to keep, let's say, relatively centered, but rotate to my max. I'm pretty much going to see what you see. Now, you do have a bit of pressure to your left-hand side, but I feel like for me, you have so much rotation ideas, and the right elbow is working so much into this cane, that really all that's really doing is keeping that face open. And what do we know about the face that's open? Well, we know that we're going to try and save it. So for me, the reason you hit that blocky bomb ball that goes 100 miles right, Lockey golf, when you get that face like super incorrect sometimes, it's just simply because the club face is so open. Now your club face is open because of the way in which you pivot. So if we change the pivot, we can change the arm structure, and then we can change the club face. So rather than you working up to all the backswing and sort of putting pressure down and forward with rotation, what I'd like to see is a different type of pivot. So where we work up to all the backswing, and almost feeling like, and dare I say it, I mean, it's super, let's say, almost a bit of a fashion fad now. Let's almost move pressure left while not trying to rotate as quickly, always trying to stay super close with the pelvis and pivot. So a bit like Rory McIlroy does, we're going to go up to the backswing and allow yourself to move pressure and sort of shift into the trail side. But by the time you get to about lead arm parallel on the way back, I want you to feel like your pelvis is fully rotated, but you've got the majority of your pelvis, you might not get all of it, but to your lead side. Okay, and you're trying to get this pelvis to rotate as much as possible. And here's the rub. Ideally, we want to still feel like the pelvis is working close towards the target within transition. So rather than you ripping open early, I almost want you to feel like you're falling into the target while retaining a bit of closure on the pelvis. So now you're pushing pressure without ripping open. Obviously that's going to keep your hand path from ripping open and over the top. It's going to keep you feeling a bit more shallow. Pretty simple drill for you to do there is to feel like the pelvis works this way while taking the right foot with you. So almost feeling like as you work up to the backswing, feeling like as you move into towards the target, you're trying to get the right foot to stay pretty, almost sort of Scotty Scheffler-esque, where the right foot sort of slides a little bit more inwards. That's going to keep your hand path from driving too far out. It's also going to keep your right hip from firing too quickly. And now we can start to make a very different golf swing. So the feels have got to be where you got to the top of the backswing, feel like you move pressure left. You can see my entire hip is moving towards the lead side. So as I move up to the top, the higher really the bigger turns, the better. The right hip moving more behind you. It's going to help delivery. Up to the top, pressure moving to the left. And I want you to feel like you're continually falling into the target while staying relatively close in the upper body. So up to the top of the backswing, get on that pressure plate, around about halfway back, start to move pressure down and forward, staying really closed, pressure really into that left and lead side. And you're trying to push up vertically and turn super late. Like it's as late as you can get it. That is going to change your pressure trace and that's going to change your path. So rather than you going up to the backswing, getting super this way and then releasing, I want you to feel like you're going up to the backswing, falling into your left as you reach the top of the backswing while staying relatively closed. And then once you're in a pretty low position, you're still pretty closed. This is a pretty sort of exceptionally overdone feel. You're going to push up and turn. So you're through impact now, you're pushing up and turning, which is going to get the handle to rise, left shoulder to rise and turn, rather than trying to use a lot of hands and arms. So from down the line, we're going to see a pretty different club path. So rather than seeing that very angular held on delivery, we might even see a slightly wider downswing. So rather than going up to the backswing and seeing that type of move, where it's almost super pinched in, getting almost holding a lot of angle, where you've almost got to try and time it up, what we're going to be trying to do here is work up to the top of the backswing, feeling like the pelvis turns in a way that's relatively, let's say, full. It's almost going to feel like it's almost staying closed relative to the target as you move pressure left. And as you do that, I almost want you to feel like, as you come on down, this is just arms. I almost want you to feel like your chest is remaining close to the target, not spinning open, arms working as low as you can get them. So just as you got to the top of the backswing and you're moving into the target, arms to be working down. As you're doing that, you're almost trying to get rid of hinge. You're almost trying to get rid of the hinge on the way down. And here's the rub. There's a lot going on here, but the reality is a lot of the issues come from the club face. So I can get the body and pivot working well, and this is where the journey comes in. Let's get the body and pivot working well. Gives you an opportunity to use the club face. When you feel comfortable, and this is probably the best thing about coaching, is when the player feels comfortable, we can start to work a feeling of the club face getting slightly stronger throughout the downswing. So when you start the downswing, then eventually you can go up to the top of the backswing. We're going to get that path moving right because of pivot. So the path to swing direction, the club head is going to swing a little more to the right, a bit more into out, a bit more shallow with strike. We talked about angle attack getting too steep sometimes. Obviously that's going to make strike feel pretty rubbish. The shallower we can get the golf club, the shallower the angle attack. But the face that's open and to the right, it's a bye-bye. So we need to make sure the face is strong enough, which is why I'm going to keep the grip where it is. We've then just got to feel very subtle twisting on the club face to keep it closed. And then we stabilize the wrist angles through impact where they don't feel like they're changing. So you're almost hitting the shot this way rather than hitting the shot that way. So we're going to go for impact, feeling very stable, little to no, let's say, usage of the wrist, although they are going to be active. To you, they're going to feel almost like a punch shot. It's almost going to feel like a really shallow punch shot if you wanted to keep it super simple. So the feels have got to be pelvis to feel like they're turning in a way where pressure's moving towards the lead side. The arms are almost falling down, chest staying super closed. You're staying as close as possible to the target for as long as possible. And then from there, you're going to push up and turn to a bit of a Tommy Fleetwood. Who doesn't want to swing it like Tommy Fleetwood? Everybody wants to swing it like Tommy Fleetwood, like a Tommy Fleetwood swing. And that's going to be you. You're going to be Matt, the coach, Fleetwood Lockey. That's basically what I'm going to put you on my phone as. Start off slow, so it's going to look something like that to start with. Don't worry about strike, just hit a few shots where you're feeling super different. Let's widen out that arc, shallow out strike, while try and keep loft relatively low. So, let me send you a few drills on the back of this. Let's change that sequence. Good luck, Coach.
Good luck indeed, Pete. Super excited to get working on my swing, and I've also done this because I want to practice more and play a bit more. Like, I get super lazy in between trips that me and Mark go on. I'm editing a lot, like I think Pete mentioned in the video as well. So when I do go and film, I just literally go straight back home, start editing it all, try and get it all uploaded. So after each filming session, I'm either going to try and just stay there for an extra hour, do a bit of practice. I've got a surprise in my garden also, which I'll show you soon coming, which will also hopefully make me practice a little bit more too. So yeah, keep an eye on my swing, keep an eye on all my socials, and see how this journey for me continues. Thanks all for watching. See you all in the next video.